All right, welcome back to the Kiss FAQ, a deep dive exploration into You Wanted the Best, You Got the Best, the compilation celebrating its 30th anniversary following its release in 1996 in conjunction with the Kiss Alive Worldwide tour. At that time, obviously, most fans realized that the vocals had been messed with. They weren't contemporaneous. And one of the interesting cases for that compilation is a really, really cool track in its Room Service, which was attributed to Davenport at the time. And we knew that there had been 2 Davenport shows recorded. What we did not know was that Room Service was not actually performed during either of those shows. It was recorded during a rehearsal prior to the show. And that's one of the benefits to these box sets coming out. Now we get to finally hear the ingredients to Kiss Alive. And at the time that it was performed at those rehearsals, it wasn't even recorded with a vocal. They were recording it as an instrumental. Clearly, the band members were under the weather. As you can hear from the rest of those shows, they were potentially saving their voices. But also, conversely, they were potentially also addressing plans to more fully utilize the studio for the creation of Kiss Alive. The product had transformed from its original conception as a live album with 3 sides live and 1 side studio into much more than just a live album, where potentially they thought they could record Kobo and, tart it up slightly and release it. That wasn't the case. So they tried again in Cleveland. That didn't work. And then I think they completely changed how they were approaching recording a live album. And as we kind of know, most of the drums were salvaged and quite a bit else was rebuilt from the ground up. So understanding now that it was originally only an instrumental when recorded in Davenport in 1975, that changes the dynamic of how I appraise the You Wanted the Best recording, because it's not a bait and switch situation like the other songs could potentially have been. I've talked about it in some of the other videos for the songs, that I now understand more clearly that there may have been other reasonable explanations for re-recording the vocals. Sure, there may have been an arrogance that no one's going to notice, or we don't care if they do. Fine, they're Kiss and we're not. But there are also plenty of missing vocals. There were mic issues. There were flubs. There were things that potentially could be cleaned up in order to make it the best possible presentation of those archival tracks. And when you've got something like Room Service that doesn't even have a vocal to use that we're aware of, again, there were other, I think, takes recorded during that rehearsal. But as far as we know, there weren't vocals available, and they didn't seem to mind, using it in that form. So it makes sense that, okay, we're going to finish this one. We've got these other songs that we're, doing vocal cleanups for because of these slight errors to make the quality. Why don't we add a vocal to Room Service? So I'm not aware of any other soundboard recording from 1975 that has a contemporaneous recording for Paul's vocal. So we've got nothing with which to compare, in essence. So for the sake of completeness, I want to compare as best as currently possible Paul's vocal circa 1975 versus 2 decades later. So for this exercise, I'm going to pull a stem from the Fremd High School soundcheck, which I think is, of the versions of the song from that show, it did the best in terms of quality of separation, but it's had to be heavily treated in order to make this comparison. What I'm looking for is phrasing, just to compare how Paul did in trying to recreate 1975. And again, potentially they had other sources available to check. So the quality of the separation for the Fremd version, which will be illustrated here when I shut up, is heavily treated and nowhere near that of the quality of the You Wanted the Best separation. Let's go. Here's the vocal.
I'm feeling low, no place to go, and I'm thinking that I'm gonna scream because a hotel all alone is not a rock and roll all-star's dream.
Okay, nothing I can do about a little bit of bleed through going on in this vocal track from the 192 HD Tracks version of You Wanted the Best, so my apologies.
He didn't know no place now, and I was thinking that I'm gonna sleep.
So even slightly partial there, you get an idea of how Paul sounded in 1975. Clearly, if you've heard enough of the recordings, archival soundboards and whatever, you know he had a different phrasing. He was singing, I guess, more from his gut than he later did as his skills developed. So it is what it is. You're going to hear a little bit of bleed through of instrumentation. There's nothing I can do about that. But you will get to hear some of Peter Criss's integral backing vocals as we go further into the Fremd vocals.
And as if I'm too tired, or if I'm just too dead for room service, baby, I could use a meal. Room service, do what you feel. Room service, I take the pleasure with the pain. I can't say no.
All right, so Paul clearly 1996, and Gene very much backing vocals, and maybe Paul doing some as well. Who knows who else? But here you'll hear, well, maybe you'll hear a bit of a difference.
And as if I'm too tired, or if I'm just too dead. Room service, room service, I take the pleasure with the pain. I really know.
All right, Peter Criss on the lead vocals. No, Peter really comes through strong on that sound check recording. Plus, obviously, the music. No way to work around that, but you still get a good idea of that section of the song. Let's go back to You Wanted the Best.
But just then, I'm about to take my coat and get my flight. She says, oh, please. She's on her knees. And one more time before I leave. I'm about to tell her, stop it. She up there, getting mad all the time. She goes back.
So once again, we get Paul singing the proper lyric versus the version on stage in 1975, where, just a little bit is left out, whether or not they knew that or not. Well, Paul's doing the whole hog in 1996.
But just then, I'm about to tell her, yes, I think I can. I'm about to tell her, yes, I think I can.
All right, so that's the vocal comparison. Apples and elephants. You're simply not comparing like for like there. It's a little bit unfair to Paul, but other than to say Paul sounded fantastic in 1996 when recording these songs. Let's jump into more Peter Criss. Let's look at the drum difference between 1996 and 1975, for what that's worth. All right, so those sound big, enhanced. Are they recorded 1996? I doubt it. I think they're just treated off original. So that's off the rehearsal from the box set, clearly. Again, you get what feels like an unaffected drum track there. And with enhancements and all the tracks, I think you easily get to what's above. But I could be wrong. Who knows? very similar once again between the two there. Not much difference in the patterns. So let's go for the final comparison. I have no idea where I'm in the song. Let's see if we can figure it out. Cowbell. All right, so clearly that's the ending section of the song. Let's go to to Davenport. Davenport, pardon me. All right, Peter Criss on the drums. What do you think? Legit 75, treated, or cheated? Let's go on to the guitars. Good garage fuzz tone there on the original, which was the second of the samples used. That separated out very nicely for my ears. So again, they sound very similar. Slight speed difference, again, I think acceptable and understandable in terms of the difference in transfers of many decades in between. But I'm not hearing enough to call shenanigans on anything here. Very much the same. Again, not hearing that much of a difference. And I think this is getting near the end of the sections that I'm going to present. All right, something sounds weird with that solo, and I don't know whether it's down to the algorithm, human error, how it was affected in 1996 or what, but the sounds and sonics, the kind of unpleasant sparkle that it's got in the high-end frequencies is really not pleasant whatsoever. All right, so the original, I highlighted a couple of, I don't want to call them flubs, but maybe fingering slightly off or a mispick or whatever. Guitarists, chime in the comments with what you think happened there for Ace's original solo from Davenport in 1975. And then we're going to just play the ending sections of both of the songs, first with You Wanted the Best and then Davenport. Love the sound of that. It's absolutely fantastic. There's again, the original, I'm glad that we've got that now, even if it is an instrumental, but it really does sounds groovy, man. All right, let's dig into the solo a little bit more and see what we see and hear what we hear. All right. That's the isolated solo itself without the rhythm underneath to really dig into trying to figure out what's going on here. And again, as I'm not a guitarist or an engineer, I'm going to need some help from the audience. What do you think is going on? Because that is very sparkly. That is very aggressive. That sounds very modern. That almost sounds potentially like a modern recording. By whom? I know Ace did say in one interview that he'd done a little bit of a studio time on the recording, or for the recordings. Is that potentially what Ace had recut in 1996? And how painful would that have been for him to, relearn that solo? It wasn't something that he was playing with the Ace Frehley Band. So again, possible, or did they get Tommy to do it? Oh, he was around. He could play. If that's even flawed in the slightest, it's still glorious. It sounds absolutely fantastic, that 1975. Let's just do some of the rhythm guitars that we pulled from underneath those solos. But the solo section is the one I think people will be rewinding the most for. So chime in with your comments, please. That's the guitar solos. Those isolated out very well. I guess if I could go back and do it all again, I might potentially want to do that sort of treatment for some of the other solos. But this is the only one that jumped out as having something, I'm not going to say wrong with it, something different about it. It had a guitar difference. So, shenanigans? I don't know. It sounds damn good, though. It's again, it's a great song. If you don't like the 1996 version anymore, or you never did because of the vocals, now you know at least why it was recorded the way it was to complete it. Because people would have bitched about it if it had had a instrumental on the "You Wanted the Best" version, or had not been used for that matter. So, if it was a difference between it being used and not being used, does that change the calculus? Knowing what we now know or think we know. So chime in the comments on all those things, and then check out the other videos in this series for the deep dive into the new archival recordings released on You Wanted the Best. You Got the Best in 1996.
Oh, look, you're still here, watching or listening. We're not sponsored, monetized, or supervised. We're only in this for subs and likes and kicks. So why don't you mash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment about today's episode.